Thank you very much indeed, and welcome to the House of Commons. I think I understood the sequence of events. Today you've been over in the Department of Business, or DTI as some of us still call it, and you're coming over to the Commons. The next such event will be over in that department, and then in the House of Lords, and then the following occasion you're in the Treasury. But you didn't quite fill the sequence, so I assume you're going up to Buckingham Palace after that. Obviously, this initiative gets to the parts that other initiatives don't reach. I think it's worth just mentioning, by the way, you referred to the UK Internet Governance Forum. It's been quite an interesting challenge over recent times to deal with that issue, because it really arose out of the decision at the World Summit on the Information Society in 2005 not to go down the route of trying to pretend that the internet could be governed by a United Nations agency or international treaty. It just would never keep up, but believe me, there were certain forces in the world that wanted to go down that road. And the problem with governance is that nobody takes a great interest until things go pear-shaped. So I'd like to say how grateful we are to the banks for demonstrating that governance is actually important. And you may have noticed that people who took no interest in the governance of banks are taking a very great deal of interest nowadays. And I think that fits very well with your programme of challenging people to see how IT, how ICT, how the internet, whichever aspect you're talking about, is actually something that needs to be brought up to the very highest levels of decision making. It's a real problem, I think, in many places that those sorts of things are left as if they can be left to the techies, the people who understand it. I don't understand this, I'm merely a policy person. And you can't really afford to do that. The things that are really important, like where's all the money in any department, any organisation, any local authority, is something that has to occupy people at the top end. They may not actually be interested in the finance or the IT, they don't have to be, but they have to understand how it relates to the activities of the organisation. My first interest in the use of IT came when I was Chairman of Finance of Cardiff City Council. The only reason I became Chairman of Finance was I could see that I wouldn't get any policy sorted unless I got a grip on the finance. I have never had any interest in finance, and my children were greatly amused about the idea that I would be Chair of Finance. They said, "Dad, you can't sort our finances out, how are you going to run the city?" Which is a perfectly reasonable comment to make. It quickly became apparent to me that unless we understood not just how the finances work, but then how the systems work, we were going to run into problems way down the line. That still is a challenge, I think, to most organisations. If I can say one little anecdote, an experience from my time as Minister of State at DEFRA, Margaret Becker kindly decided that I was the IT Minister for the department. And I was approached by the Permanent Secretary asking for a quick decision on a recommendation on a major IT programme. It was the Enabling DEFRA programme. I hope you've never heard of it, because it's the one that didn't go wrong. But the recommendation was basically, the board has looked at this, everybody's happy with it, please Minister, would you just sign it off so we can get on with it, we don't want further delay. And I sort of looked at the papers and I said, I'm taking this home for the weekend, sorry. And I came back and said, I don't understand what we are trying to do here, and I don't understand the criteria, I don't understand the recommendations. And made use of the Office of Government Commerce at that time by going to them and asking them a number of questions. The result was the first Gateway Zero review that was undertaken within government, a process which examined, using independent experts, whether we were doing the right thing. The conclusion, we were going in the right direction, but we were about 50% out in terms of the financial provision that was being made, and about a third out in terms of the timescale with which it was practical to undertake it. And finally, that we ought to involve independent industry expertise to work inside the department with those who are bidding and then contracting in order to get the equation right. That's why I'm saying I'm proud at the end of the day that it's the project that nobody will have heard of. I think it was the the winners and the losers in terms of the bidding actually referred very positively to the process. My point is that I didn't understand the technicalities or the processes, but it had to come to my desk in order to be challenged properly. And I do believe that we underestimate at top levels of government, the levels of ministers, but yes, also permanent secretaries, how important it is for the way in which the department is engaging with what is a necessity of life for any government department in this day and age, properly at the top policy level. And yes, it's not easy, and yes, you expect your experts within the department or within the company to be advising you properly, but you can't just delegate and say it's not, the final decisions are not for me. And as I understand it, this is part of the emphasis that you've been putting and exploring today, is that digital leadership isn't just leadership by the technologists or the experts. The leadership has to be taking it right to the heart of decision making for every government department, for every local authority, and by the way, for companies in the private sector as well, where the same tendencies very often can obtain. Leadership is extremely important, isn't it? And separating the responsibilities of leadership from understanding the importance of IT, I think is very important. So I'm very strongly in support of the Digital Leaders programme. I'm delighted to see people like Toby, Lord Harris and Andrew Miller, who have both done a great deal over recent years to try to promote within Parliament, and particularly the work of PIPCOM, an understanding of these things, because I think we've got a big challenge here as well. I think both of them would agree with me that in recent times we've struggled to have members of Parliament and members of the House of Lords taking the sort of interest they need to. It's those of us who came in when the internet was still something fairly new, and we knew we didn't understand it, that have taken a lead in the parliamentary engagement. It was disappointing. The last two parliaments, very few of the incoming MPs took a great deal of interest. Many of them had used the internet in daily basis in their profession or in their business before coming in, and therefore they took it for granted. I am rather pleased that there are a number of new MPs on the Conservative benches and on the Labour benches, and there has been a little bit of a lack of Liberal Democrat, but there are one or two Liberal Democrats who are taking interest now, and I'm encouraged to think that we, in the next year or so, may have a much better informed and more engaged group of parliamentarians who will be particularly interested in the work that you're undertaking and the outcome of these sessions that you're running now. I mean, the importance of all this, I think, is illustrated in the report that was out today. I don't know if people have seen the report that came out. I think it was commissioned by Google but produced by the Boston Consulting Group, which sets out very starkly, it must be pretty stark because it managed to get through to the BBC, the extent of the reach and the value in business terms, £100 billion a year to the UK economy, which means that it's the fifth largest UK economic sector, which is dramatically important, and that's I think something that we'll be able to use in saying to members of Parliament, you really need to engage with this. This is no longer peripheral. Added to which, if that is the size of the sector, even more important is the reach of that into every other sector, and the dependency. One could look on the pessimistic side on the vulnerabilities for every other sector of industry. On the other hand, there are the opportunities there as well. In a time of financial constraint, although we've heard, for instance, ministers saying we're not going to put a lot of money into expensive IT projects, I think that's good if it's IT projects that are going to absorb money without good effect. But on the other hand, a time when you're trying to do more with less, right across government departments and indeed the public sector at every level throughout the country, it's inevitable that there is going to have to be a lot of innovation in the way that IT is used. Now the problem with that is, of course, that there's a danger that you'll get to a greater number of people reached through the internet, through online transactions and so on. Squeezing down the numbers who aren't able to use it, but that squeezed grouping are a considerable danger. We're in very great danger of seeing the most disadvantaged people in society left out even more by the advantages that accrue, whether to departments or to the individuals who are able to undertake their transactions online. And I think there's a great deal of need for people in leadership responsibilities, whether it's ministers, whether it's councillors, whether it's top officials in any organisation, to be very keenly aware of that element of risk that's there. Doing things on the cheap and failing to provide for those who are unable to undertake online transactions or unable to get information online would be a very short-sighted procedure indeed, and could put considerable risks in the way. I can't resist saying there that one of the things that government departments could do would be to embrace start here and stop faffing around. Sadly, ministers nearly always get it, and I think this is true across party, but officials in government departments don't seem to have grasped the opportunity that an approach which starts with the person who needs the information rather than those who need to give the information actually has enormous benefits to the department, not just to those individuals. And I hope, Sarah, that eventually the penny will drop in the places where it needs to drop with a loud clang, and that perhaps that might happen more quickly at a time of financial constraint than in previous times. But I am holding my crossing my fingers as I say that. I'm very impressed with the initiative and what the programme is doing, and I think it's important as well for us not just to endorse and support and encourage the value of the Digital Leaders programme, but also to ask that you use the opportunity to inform members of Parliament, members of both houses, of the things that come out of the discussions, and keep us on our toes as well, given the major challenges that we're going to face over the coming months and years. And those challenges, as I say, are challenges to government departments, public sector organisations, but they're also challenges to the private sector who engage or support or work with government. And it's also a big challenge for what I would prefer to describe as civil society, the organisations that sometimes are depended on to come in to fill gaps, but actually have a tremendous amount to offer to society as partners. And one would hope, hearing that the new government has agreed to continue with the compact process, as proper partners and equal partners with government in difficult times, as well as in a time when things aren't quite as constrained as it looks as if they're going to be in the coming months. So I congratulate you on holding the event that you have today and the ones that have to come. It is very important that not only do you get benefit from them, but that benefit is fed back into public policy and into the understanding of Parliament of the issues that you're debating. I look forward to hearing the outcome, because I think there's going to be a paper produced on the things that have been discussed today, and to hearing more of this process as time goes on. So thank you very much indeed for inviting me to host this event. It's always a pleasure to see people like you over here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your time here to be able to continue networking and supping. Thank you very much indeed.